In the 1960s, I was part of the Black Liberation Movement, the Civil Rights Movement. Um, I was in college at the University of California, Santa Barbara, involved in creating the Black Studies program there, got involved in the Black Student Union there. I've been a political activist my entire life. That was in 68. Today I'm 71 years old and I've continued that activism. I think the punchline to all of this of doing political work throughout my life, I ended up working at the University of California, San Francisco, most of the 80s. And the research that we mainly did was looking at the impact of certain social situations on different groups of people. Punchline being that one of the studies we did looked at bus drivers who were predominantly Filipino and African American and showed that driving the bus essentially raised your blood pressure and made you more tense and produced more cortisol in your system and et cetera. Following that experience, I went back to school and got my master's degree and my doctorate degree. And I was living in a certain place in Oakland, California, and driving, 25, 30 miles to a job in southern part of Alameda County. And the job came up, announcement that they were looking for a program officer in tobacco. And after just a little research, finding that African Americans died disproportionately of tobacco-related diseases, I said, I can continue my quote unquote political activism through public health work. I guess the real defining moment was in 1998 when the Surgeon General's report came out, the first one on looking at health disparities for different race and ethnic populations. And I'm sitting at my desk at the university. I'm sitting at my desk, and I'm page after page after page after page is about how Black people are dying disproportionately from stroke, disproportionately from lung disease, disproportionately from coronary heart disease. And it just went on. And I was like, wow. And then when you, not to put too sharp of a point on it, most of that was from smoking. From then on, I've been focused. And then when I dug into it deeper, what were Black folks smoking? They were smoking menthol cigarettes. So then I currently work with the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council. We were formed immediately before the FDA took control of tobacco products. And of course, as you all know, there are 13 flavors excluded from cigarettes. The only one that was left in was menthol. It was straight up racist. It was unfair. And we have been fighting against it ever since. Currently, you should be aware that my group is suing the Food and Drug Administration for them dragging their feet of not making a ruling on menthol. Coming out of World War II, Black folks moved to the North, many of them, most of them, in segregated situations, and different companies took advantage of that situation and developed specific products for them, whether it was different hair creams for them or foodstuffs like Uncle Ben's rice and stuff like that, proliferated in the late 40s and early 50s. There was a survey done in 1953 that found that only 5% of African Americans smoke menthol cigarettes. And then after a series of focus groups done by Brown and Williamson in the late 50s, found that African Americans resonated with TV commercials and the messages that were in them much more than white folks. I mean, literally, we have data on this. Once they figured that out, they began to employ African Americans in TV ads, in newspaper, and particularly magazines, Jet, Ebony, magazines. You have to remember this is during the time of the Civil Rights Movement when Blacks weren't even allowed to sit at lunch counters or get jobs. And indeed, in 1963, Elston Howard, the catcher for the New York Yankees, was on a number of printouts about pushing menthol cigarettes. this is a time where the tobacco industry is hiring Black executives in North Carolina. And at the same time, this is a time when the Birmingham um, church is being blown up, or the March on Washington is taking place. So the tobacco industry is way ahead of the curve, way ahead of the curve. They began to use more Black folks with more Black features. By the early 70s, they had folks with afros and dashikis. They had basketball ads. By the 80s, there were the menthol wars, meaning that most of the tobacco industry, different brands, Cools, Camels, Benson and Hedges, Marlboros, everybody came out with the menthol brand. By the 90s, they began to even develop cigarettes that were specifically targeted cigarettes for Black people. There was Uptown cigarette that was created. There was X brand cigarette that was created. There was the, for lack of a better term, there was the Black Joe Camel that was created. This is the punchline is if it was 5% in 1953, it almost tripled to 14% by 68. It had tripled again by 1976. And today we're at 85, more than 85% of African Americans who smoke cigarettes smoke menthol cigarettes. And that's because of the predatory marketing of the tobacco industry. I guess what was most alarming is they launched the SCUM project, and many of you are aware of the SCUM project. SCUM project was subcultural urban marketing, and that was focused on LGBTQ folks, particularly in San Francisco, but in other parts of the country. And then what's interesting to me, it took them, a few months to realize, oh, SCUM project is prejudicial, and we should call it something else. So they began to call it Sourdough Project. But they have targeted specialty products to special groups all the time, and that's what they do. Unfortunately, it's had quite a devastating effect on the African American community, but they target other communities. Let me just say, people that are interested in dealing with in their community against the tobacco industry is that you have to get in there personally and see how they're doing the advertising. Let me tell you what they do in the Black community. There are more advertisements for menthol cigarettes in African American communities compared to other communities. There are more lucrative promotions in the African American community compared to other communities. The cigarettes are cheaper in the African American community than other places. So here are the most, the people that are very oppressed are getting their death sticks cheaper. It's frankly, it's outrageous and disrespectful. So menthol is an anesthetic by definition. It allows you for deeper inhalation. The more nicotine and toxins you take in, the more addicted you become. The more addicted you become, the harder it is to quit. And we have data on all of this. I mean, menthol inhibits the metabolism of cotinine in your liver. Cotinine is the what nicotine turns into when it gets to your liver. If you smoke menthol cigarettes, it slows down the metabolism of the nicotine that stays in your body longer. Take it even further. If the darker the color your skin, the more nicotine stays in your body, or what we call melanin. The melanin is what gives us all color. And if you smoke cigarettes, nicotine stays in the melanin. The other thing menthol happens is what we call greater cell permeability. Greater cell permeability means that if you smoke a cigarette product that has menthol in it, it crosses the cell membrane much more efficiently than if it doesn't have it in it. So when you begin to add all these different things up, it stays in your body longer, it's greater cell permeability. There's even another factor. We've compared, there's studies that show that folks that smoke menthol cigarettes have what we call more nicotine receptors in their brain, meaning the menthol creates a they're more addictive. I mean, in a lecture, I could kind of go over this in a little bit more detail, but they're more addictive. They're harder to quit. They stay in your body longer. It's a setup, it's a straight up setup. There's almost an assumption that now that it's been exposed for so many years, they're not doing it anymore. And that's just not true. All those things, it's still cheaper. There's still more promotions. There's still more advertising. There are coupons being given away. They're being promoted in black magazines. If anything, it has intensified. The tobacco industry has been giving money to black organizations to fight COVID. They're just opportunists at the core. Let me make sure I get this out there because this may not be asked. The question would be, why did they leave menthol out of it in the first place? Was it just straight up racist? And I mean, why menthol? Why are we having why am I even here talking with you about it? I guess the punchline is this, that generally speaking, I guess these are 2018 data, that the tobacco industry is somewhere in the neighborhood of a $221 billion industry. $221 billion industry. The tobacco industry gave over $1 million away in Philadelphia to 3 notable black organizations. And I could look, you guys could look that up. And this is to help them fight COVID-19 and to fight racism. And here's the most racist, backward group of people doing this. Let me just expand this more broadly. The tobacco industry gives money to as many people as they can. Some of us are involved in a campaign to stop people from taking tobacco money. And unfortunately, many groups take money from the tobacco industry. Unfortunately, we know that the national newspapers editors, National Newspaper Producers Association, Ben Chavis, who used to be the chair of the NAACP, takes money from the tobacco industry. We know that the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, NOBLE, takes money from the tobacco industry. We know that NAN, the National Action Network, which Al Sharpton has, come out in front and been very open in the fight against racism and for Black Lives Matter. He takes money from the tobacco industry. The list, unfortunately, just goes on and on and on. Look at it this way. Most civic, social, political, cultural, and religious groups in the Black community take money from the tobacco industry.